So what's the difference between good infill and bad infill?
Well, infill is something that's going to become part of our lives more and more, and we've seen examples of this working well and examples of this working poorly. I'm particularly upset when I see a poorly orchestrated project because it makes the public fear infill, it makes the public not want infill. The example I point to is the recent Joe Weiss development near the Washington School in northwest Rochester. As I see it, and many members of the neighborhood association, Joe never made a good faith effort to negotiate with the neighbors. Instead, he was comfortable and believed that he had the necessary votes on the city council to force through whatever kind of project he wanted to do. And you know what? Joe was right. He had the 4 votes there that were all along. He didn't need to negotiate. The neighborhood had some very reasonable requests. They wanted a safe street, but instead we gave him a variance that made it for a very unsafe street. They wanted a project that fit with the character of the neighborhood and fit reasonably on the land that they had. They absolutely got stepped on in this regard. And it's important to realize that these projects, they don't come out of the ether. They're a representation of the people we have on the city council and what they're willing to tolerate. And the reality is this neighborhood association really got beaten down by the process. They were not treated fairly by the city council. And there's a number of conflicts of interest that existed in this manner too. Certainly we can't be tolerant of developers continuing to vote for more and more subsidies and variances for development interests. That's the way we go down the wrong path. What we need to see is we need to see people without conflicts of interest voting on these issues. And if you do have a conflict of interest, that's the real world. But what should happen is you should recuse yourself and not vote in that situation. We also need to make sure that we appoint people to our planning and zoning board and other commissions that don't have these inherent conflicts of interest. So when I talk about doing good infill, that means you're going to do a project that fits with the scope and the character of the neighborhood. You're going to do a project that is not necessarily single use, that doesn't necessarily concentrate poverty or concentrate business on one site, but rather have a number of things on each site. We can build buildings that have commercial space, that have retail space, as well as living space, and we don't need to make sure that we concentrate all low-income housing in one particular area. That's not good for the betterment of the community. So good infill housing is something that takes all of these aspects into account and comes up with a solution that doesn't leave the neighborhood feeling trampled on. And bad infill development is just that. It tramples on the neighborhood, it destroys the character of the neighborhood, it doesn't protect the historical landmarks that we have still remaining in this town, and it doesn't abuse the tax structure that's in place. It's important that we do this right because this is the future of our community, and the decisions that we're making now are going to affect us for the next 100 years.